These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they are described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. My grandmother warned me never to whistle at night. I didn't listen. I wasn't raised to believe in superstition. My mother was a nurse and my father a civil engineer, two very rational people who met in college, got married, and moved to a quiet, unassuming suburb in Virginia to raise a family. But every summer, they'd send me to stay with my grandmother in rural Ghana. She lived in a small, sun-baked village wrapped in dust and mystery. It was the kind of place that refused to die, as though the land itself wouldn't let it. Time moved differently there. And so did logic. Her name was ESI, but everyone called her Awo Mame. Wednesday Mother. A title passed down to the oldest woman in the village born on a Wednesday. And with it came responsibility. She knew things I wasn't supposed to ask about. She never let me go out past sundown. Not just because it was dangerous, but because the air changes at night, she'd say. The wind stops blowing. The trees listen. And if you whistle, they'll know where you are. I was 9 the first time she told me that. I laughed. She didn't. I'm 29 now. And I haven't whistled in 20 years. Until last week. And now I can't sleep. I can't breathe right. And I'm not sure who or what is in my apartment. Let me explain. A few months ago, my grandmother passed away in her sleep. Peacefully. No drama. My family barely mentioned it. She'd lived a long life, and in truth, we'd grown distant. Still, I felt something. Not quite grief. Not sadness either. More like unease. As if something had been buried with her that shouldn't have stayed buried. After the funeral, I went back to my city life. Fast-paced. Emotionally numb. I didn't tell anyone about the recurring dreams I started having. They always began the same. I'd be back in her village. Not the way it looked in the real world, but strange twilight forever. Purple skies. No stars. Just the sound of wind moving through the trees that didn't move. In the dream, I'd be standing at the edge of the woods, barefoot, watching something shift between the branches. Not a person. Not an animal. Something that pretended to be both. And every time I turned to run, I'd wake up with blood on my pillow from a nosebleed. Last Thursday I got drunk. I don't drink often, but I'd had a terrible week and the loneliness in my apartment felt like it was pressing down on me. I put on an old High Life record to feel close to my roots, lit a candle, and sat on my balcony overlooking the city. And I whistled. Just a tune from childhood. A lullaby, I think. I wasn't even thinking. I was just filled with some stupid nostalgia. And then my phone buzzed. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. Don't do that. They remember. I froze. The hairs on my arms stood up. I looked around the dark balcony. Nobody was there. I stood up, walked back into my apartment, and locked the sliding door behind me. Tried to laugh it off. Maybe a prank? But then the dreams came back. Worse this time. Friday night, I dreamed I was back in her house. Everything was covered in dust. Her photo was missing from the wall. I heard the sound of whistling coming from outside. Rhythmic. Patient. I looked out the window. Something stood just beyond the light of the porch bulb. Not a man. Not a shadow. But a space where both could be. It didn't move like a living thing. It glitched like bad video footage. And then it turned its face toward me. I said, face, but it didn't have one. Just a smooth surface. No eyes. No mouth. But I felt it watching me. It whispered without lips. You called us. I woke up screaming. Sweating. With a nosebleed so bad I stained my mattress. Saturday, I tried to rationalize everything. Lack of sleep. Grief. Maybe even inherited psychosis? Yes, I googled that. No shame. I went to a cafe just to be around people. On the sidewalk, An old woman in a colorful wrapper brushed past me. She looked just like my grandmother. I turned. She was gone. That night, I slept with the lights on. Still, the dream came. This time, I was in the forest again. And I wasn't alone. A girl was standing beside me. I recognized her. Me at age 9. The version of me who laughed at my grandmother's warnings. She was whistling. That same lullaby. The thing in the forest stepped closer. And then I felt its hands on my chest in the real world. I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis? I've had it before, once or twice. But this was different. The weight was too heavy. The room was too cold. The thing wasn't on my chest. It was in the room. And then it said, "Open the door." I didn't. I couldn't. I just closed my eyes and waited for morning. It's Sunday now. I haven't slept. Not really. There's a sound in my hallway. Like someone dragging their feet. A soft knock at my front door came an hour ago. But no one's there. And I swear to God, I heard whistling from inside the walls. I tried deleting this post 3 times. Each time, it saved itself as a draft with the title, "You Called Us." I'm writing this because I need to warn someone. Anyone. There are rules in this world we forgot when we stopped listening. Old gods don't die. They wait. And all it takes is a lullaby. A whistle. A memory. So if your grandmother ever warned you not to do something, don't. I didn't listen. Now I think they're already inside. Story 2. The dark places in my mind. Every time it happens, it starts with darkness. Then the red. A dim, cruel red glow that grows and grows and then envelopes me. Then, flashes of something play before me. I stand before a congregation of masked men. Where am I? And why is everything drenched in that dim red glow? I'm at a ceremony, one in the bowels of that church. How do I know this place? What even is I? With a final motion from the crowd, my surroundings explode into dust and shadow, and I watch as the earth opens. A staircase spirals into the depths of the pit. And at the bottom? Darkness, pain. Something spinning, tearing. Something sticky, cold, and squirming. And I slip into its terrible embrace. I awoke with a gasp, shooting bolt upright in my bed. There was that dream again. Like clockwork, it came on the 6th of every month, waking me at exactly 6:06 a.m. Always about that ceremony. Always in the old church. I don't know what, but something must have happened there, and for whatever reason, I can't remember it. It had been 6 months since those dreams started. 6 months of wondering, of strange questions, and, gosh, I didn't even want to think about it. I begged him not to go, but the very thing that kept me out is what drew him in. I had seen that symbol before. I knew that I had, since it made my skin crawl, though I had no idea why, since it seemed innocent enough. But either way, it repulsed me. My friend, Jacob, knew he had seen it somewhere too, but was fascinated by it. He was determined to go on that spiritual awakening trip, with or without me, and I sure as hell wasn't going. Sounded more like cult initiation to me. It was only supposed to be a month long. Now, I haven't seen him in 6. But what happened last month was the boulder that broke the camel's back. And now I had to act. Listening now, I could hear the pounding of rain on the roof, periodic thunder breaking the rhythmic noise. Of course it would be raining tonight, but ultimately I did not care, for I had made up my mind. I had to investigate the old church, had to find something, anything that might explain the strange things happening recently. Slipping on my raincoat, I stepped out into the storm. I had been walking through the darkened, sprawling streets of my town for, well, I don't know for how long. The darkness and rain blurred my surroundings, made the familiar streets of my town seem unfamiliar, almost alien, and I had wandered for longer than I had hoped. But suddenly I stopped. Peering through the pouring rain, I found myself standing before a tall, dark silhouette that towered above me. Thunder rumbled from above, and the flash of lightning that accompanied it briefly revealed what I stood in front of. The old church, right where I wanted to be. The mere sight of the old church sent a chill down my spine, though I knew not why. This place, set right between the dark, ancient forest and the deep, churning ocean, had always creeped me out. But there was that strange feeling again, something rising in my mind, shifting, like I had old, buried memories of this place that were being provoked by the sight of it. It was like I could almost remember something, some strange past. Almost. I was surprised when the door swung open with a light push. I had expected it to be locked, or for some kind of security, but as I stepped inside, I was alone. It was dark, and rain pounded on the shingles of the roof. The wind blew outside, and the old wooden frame creaked and groaned under the force of it. The only light for me to see was the periodic flashes of lightning that filtered through the stained windows, briefly rendering the interior in flashes of strange colors that cast odd, shifting shadows into the dark corners of the eerie space. I was searching for something, anything that would confirm my suspicions. One of those masks, that symbol somewhere, a note even. Turning on my flashlight, a beam of light cut through the unfamiliar darkness. I had stopped coming here ever since I found something around a month ago, and even though I had walked through this place countless times before that, it now looked alien, threatening. Sweeping the beam of light around, I saw nothing out of place. A thin layer of dust coated the rows of pews, a wooden cross hung on the wall behind the pulpit, and the majestic arched, vaulted ceiling hid shadows that no light ever seemed to be able to dissipate. To be honest, I didn't know what good could possibly come of this if I found anything. Perhaps, in this case, ignorance is bliss. You see, there would be no one for me to talk to. Nowhere for me to go even. Not in my town. It was a small sprawl of old weather-beaten wood and brick buildings located somewhere on the coast of the Pacific. Nestled between low, rolling hills covered in ancient forest, and the dark churning ocean lies a rat's nest of roads that had no thought or organization put into its layout at all. There are no city-style blocks, no main street, no road names. This town doesn't even have a name, the residents here just call it the town. Rickety, half-rotten but still somehow sturdy docks stretch a short way into the water, but nothing extends into the forest. The people here still hold on to superstition. I still live like they did on the old times, dismissing science and rationality in favor of the old tales that had been told by the founders of this place. So, an isolated fishing village, right? I wouldn't blame you for thinking that. But this town is stranger than that. Most people here work at the factory. Overlooking the town on a hill there lies a tall, brick building with towering smokestacks that never seem to spew any smoke. I have no idea what is produced there, but whatever it is, it's got to be important. It's important enough for someone outside this place to fly a helicopter out here every week to pick up a large crate of whatever is made here in exchange for a week's worth of supplies and a few new toys. That drop-off is why I've got the computer I'm writing this on. We use satellite Wi-Fi though. I came back to myself as I turned the flashlight beam to the tiled floor. Muddy footsteps had been tracked across it, blocking part of what I had seen from view. But even partially obstructed, it made my skin crawl. A horrible feeling of my skin squirming and writhing, seemingly independent of the rest of my body that almost hid the sensation of something old and rotten clawing its way up from the deep places of my mind. Where am I? It's dark here. Cold. A light grows from the darkness beneath. One that's cruel red, dim. It envelopes me and flashes of something play before my eyes, all drenched in that horrible dim red. I struggle. Masked people carry me somewhere. Inside that church, the ground tears open. A staircase spirals down. Descended. A labyrinth of blood-drenched stone. Descended. An altar. Something red, sticky, disgusting squirms atop it. Descended. A knife. Blood. Descended. I woke in a panic, scrambling away from something before I stopped. What had just happened to me? Were those memories? Whatever happened, I didn't want to think about it. I was safe right now. Alone. But I didn't really believe that, did I? Turning my flashlight down to the spot I had just laid unconscious on, I could see what had sent me into that strange state. There, on the floor, was that same, strange symbol. Right at the point where the post and the crossbeam met in a decorative cross pattern in the tiled floor, was an out-of-place circular tile. Carved into it, unmistakably, was an eye, set in the center of a seven-toothed gear. 6 oddly twisting lines extended from the eye in the center. Looking upon that symbol again brought back yet more memories. Memories. I was growing to hate that term. But now I thought of why I had come here to investigate. What happened last month that weighed on my mind until I finally came here? Understand that moving out of your childhood home was rare here. That didn't happen unless a relative died and left their house to you, or you were wealthy enough to get someone to build one for you. So, needless to say, it had been an undeniable miracle that I had found someone willing to rent out their basement as an apartment in this town. It was cramped, almost windowless, and dim, but I took it. You see, I hated living with my parents. Hell, I hated living in this town, but my parents just embodied every part of this place that I hated. Made those aspects worse, and being away from them made it bearable. I was just finishing the move into my new place when I came across that old photo album. I opened it expecting memories and nostalgia, but now? I wish I hadn't opened that cursed book. At first, it seemed normal page after page of childhood photos. Some brought back a fond memory, and others a cringe. But the first pictures of the first page gave me pause. 6 images, each labeled in the corner with that same, strange symbol, drawn by hand in red marker. Each image sent a chill of dread down my spine that I didn't understand at the time. Looking at them, the images were certainly strange, but why did I feel so weird about it? Why did I feel connected to them? It felt like something old, dead, and rotting was rising from the depths of my mind. Something that should stay forgotten. The first image was of my older sister as a newborn infant. And at the bottom of the image, it was annotated with a single word. Insufficient. The second was of my parents, holding my infant sister, seemingly standing in front of an abandoned, empty gravel lot, located right between the ocean and the forest. 3 tall, distinctive evergreens stood in the rear. The third image was of a circle of strange men and women. Each one wore casual clothing, but a strange mask covered each of their faces, and they had interlocked their hands. The fourth showed the old church, those same 3 tall evergreens visible in the background. This one was time-stamped only a day after the second image. Though painted on the brick and wood were the words, "To ascend to him above, we must do his work in the depths." The fifth depicted those same masked men and women, but this time they were each within the familiar surroundings of the old church's interior. Each one held a posture of praise, knelt down with hands raised. What stood at the front was not within frame. Thinking back on it now, the scene bore an uncanny resemblance to that first part of my recurring dream. The 6th image filled me with a kind of dread that I had never once felt before, though I expect to feel again. It was so familiar to me, yet with one change that made my hands shake so bad I nearly dropped the photo album. It was an old, yellowed photo of me, and wiping away the thin layer of dust that had settled atop it, I could read the single word scrawled across the top of the image in messy, rushed handwriting. Sufficient. Looking at that symbol again, I once more felt something. An old memory that I could just about recall, deep within the dark depths of my mind where old memories are forgotten and left to rot. Something dead and rotten rose, but stayed hidden. Those memory flashes I had, were they the first part of this thing making itself known? The dark interior of the church now felt more mysterious than before. More dangerous than before. But I doubted that anywhere else would be more than a little better. Getting up from my position close to the floor, I moved for the exit, but didn't make it far before I stopped. Was that breathing I could hear behind me? I turned around, the sound of creaking and groaning floorboards audible above the pounding rain for a moment, and looked deep within the odd, unnatural shadows that now surrounded me. Nothing. A loud, rumbling boom filled the air, and a flash of light illuminated those dark corners. And for a split second, I could see the dark, empty eyes of familiar masks staring back at me. I swear that as I turned to leave, I could see them rise in unison for some unknown collective purpose, but I didn't stay for that. So, stepping through the door, I left the old church once more, hoping to leave those memories behind. Walking out, I tried to avoid looking at the old graveyard next to the church. I swear that place was evil, and only evil ever came of it. It was the only place in town that extended any distance into the ancient, twisted snarl of unnatural trees that beset the town from the east, and yet, despite my hatred of the place, I found my eyes drawn to it. And there, in that horrible field of worn stone and the dead, stood a crowd of the living. They all gazed upwards, into the unremarkable sky. Covering my eyes from the rain, I followed their gaze to find nothing. Or was there something there? I swear, thinking back, that there was something up in those clouds. Something the color of a dim, cruel red. When I got home, the door swung wildly in the wind. Slamming open and shut, I found that the frame had been shattered around the latch and locks. Concerned, but also relieved to have some distraction, I entered to find my cramped basement apartment destroyed. Ransacked. Stuff thrown everywhere, glass shattered on the floor crunched under my rain boots as I looked around. It didn't take long for me to find the trail of blood leading deeper in. In the next room I found him. My mouth went dry and I lost any words I might have had to say to him. This was something I had fantasized about, hoped for even, but no. Not like this. My childhood friend, sitting against the wall where he seemingly dragged himself through the glass-covered floor. Blood dripped from cuts along his arms and head, as he just sat there, eyes closed, shaking. Jacob? His legs. Oh God, his legs below the knee, why were they like that? The muscle and bone was replaced with hydraulics and metal and gears. He came back. He spoke between heavy breaths, like he couldn't get enough air. Do you remember? I dared not speak to him. About it. The stairs under the old church? Do you remember? Please, stop, don't talk about that. They let us down, so far down, through the blood-drenched earth. I whimpered. They put me on the altar, and gave you the knife, and you killed me, Arthur. Look. He lifted his shirt to show me the scars. So many scars, stab after stab after stab. And Jacob began laughing. He sounded crazy, he was crazy, and yet. They threw me in that dark pit, pushed you in after, but I'm dead, Arthur, remember? He burst out laughing now. Dead, 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 dead. But the machines, they keep me alive. I looked at him. More closely now, and something was off. Why did he look almost like a zombie? Rotten, fiddled. Forgotten. What was down there, Arthur? I know you saw it, but I couldn't. Tell me, Arthur, what was down there? I left him babbling insane nonsense behind me. He was crazy. Yes, crazy, right? He's crazy. No, he is crazy. I spoke it aloud as if to convince myself, but it was hollow. Empty. Because I did remember. Getting my memories of that accursed place back wasn't like a dam breaking. It wasn't like a flood, it wasn't overwhelming at all. I can't even point to a single moment where I remembered, only that it was when Jacob was talking. I just remembered. I remembered the ground opening in the old church, the pit underneath, and the staircase spiraling down. I remembered descending. I remembered the blood-drenched pipes and cogs, pistons, belts, and engines that jutted from the walls of that underground place that shuddered and turned. Gosh, they were so loud. That old room, the altar. I remembered killing Jacob. Oh God, I actually did it. Why would I do that? I wouldn't do that, would I? After that, I remember being thrown into that pit. I remember falling down further and further into the dark, pinpricks of light around me like old, broken stars in a dying universe, further down and down. Did I ever come out? That's the one thing that I don't remember. I don't remember coming out. I went back to that church. I did it and I looked. Over and over and over, I swear that symbol in that cross pattern was gone, but just as I was about to leave, I found it. Oh God, why did I have to find that again? Why? The tile, the one with the symbol? It was twisted. I hated it, oh how I hated touching that symbol, but it turned, and the ground opened just like my dream. There was the pit, the staircase, those lights emitting that dim red, the darkness. It was all the freaking same, the same as my dream. My memory. I'm going down there. I have to know because, well, memories aren't always accurate, right? I have to go down and I have to hope that it's just nothing. But if my memory is right or if something worse is down there, I just don't want to be forgotten. Please, remember me, just don't forget me, please. There's just one question weighing on my mind. One question that hasn't been answered. What am I sufficient for? I'll update if I come back. Story 3. There's a parasite living in my apartment. Have you ever had to deal with a pantry moth infestation? If so, then you know just how irritating and disgusting it can be. Tossing out food all the time, even stuff you just opened, scrubbing every inch of the kitchen like a maniac, and having to move everything into vacuum-sealed containers. And then, just when you think it's finally over, you open a jar of oatmeal only to find that those little bastards somehow got in, laid their eggs, and now you've got larvae in your breakfast. And the whole cycle begins again. That's the state I'd been living in for a few months, at the time when everything started. After countless failed attempts to get rid of them, I had finally decided to get some traps. Yeah, I should have done it much earlier, but, to be honest, I was feeling quite hesitant about it. You see, for as long as I can remember, I've always had a strong sensitivity toward animals, and, for 4 years now, I've been vegan. Because of this, even the thought of killing those tiny pests made me feel really uneasy. I'm well aware of how people see vegans, especially online, and I'm sure some of you are already rolling your eyes and thinking I'm some crazy extremist. That's fine, I'm used to it. And no, I'm not trying to convert anyone. It's just a personal decision based on my own moral compass. If anyone reading this is also vegan or vegetarian, I'm sure you're familiar with the kind of ethical dilemmas people love to throw at us when they hear about our diet. Stuff like, if you were on a desert island with only chickens and pigs, would you eat them to survive? Or, would you kill an animal if it was attacking you and your family? Always asked with a satisfied grin, as if it's some kind of clever, gotcha moment. Well, my situation with the pantry moths had turned into something like that. It was no longer just a matter of hygiene or food waste, it had become a matter of survival, either me or them. So, on my next trip to the supermarket, I filled my basket with those sticky traps that you attach to cupboard doors. That weekend, I committed myself to a full-on cleaning operation. I completely emptied the kitchen shelves, threw away all the food they contained, and even went as far as replacing every single glass container. I vacuumed and washed every shelf, and placed a couple of traps in each cabinet, hoping this would finally put an end to the whole ordeal. And for a while it seemed like it had. I wasn't exactly thrilled to see dead moths stuck to the cabinet doors, but at least I felt a huge sense of relief. Then one morning I found it. I was just reaching for the sugar for my coffee when I saw it, stuck to one of the traps. At first, I flinched, thinking it was a centipede or some other creepy bug. Then, looking closer, I realized it was something else. It was about 4 inches long and looked like a piece of fabric, although incredibly thin. It reminded me of the shed skin of a snake, almost transparent, but with faint brown streaks, more similar in color to the moths themselves. There was something deeply unsettling about it. I didn't know what it was, but the idea that it had come from some weird insect still lurking somewhere in my kitchen made my skin crawl. At that moment, I, a grown man, nearly 30 years old, found myself wishing I still lived with my parents, that I could just call for my dad and ask him to deal with whatever that thing was. Yeah, feel free to laugh about me, scared by a piece of cloth. I must admit that I felt ridiculous once I really thought about it. Still, I wasn't completely ready to handle that thing, at least not before understanding what it was. I turned to Google, but the research turned out quite unsuccessful. At the very least, the fact that no other insect or parasite seemed to match the description of what I had found made me feel much better, and I concluded that there was nothing to worry about. Doing my best to suppress my gag reflex, I armed myself with some paper towels, managed to remove the trap from the wall and threw it in the trash, replacing it with a new one. In the days that followed, I never came across anything like that again, and, eventually, I ended up completely forgetting about it. At the same time, however, the moth problem, which I thought was over, started getting worse again. I was seeing them outside the kitchen now. Sometimes a couple would show up on the bathroom walls, in the living room, even in the bedroom. Although many ended up stuck to the traps, their numbers never seemed to shrink. And no matter how often I checked and obsessively cleaned the cupboards, I just couldn't figure out where they were coming from. Of course, my discomfort was deeper than ever. I had nearly stopped purchasing dry goods altogether and, in general, made an effort to spend as little time in the kitchen as possible. Most of my meals now consisted of frozen food or takeaway. It was starting to take a toll on my mental health too. Seeing them crawling on the walls and ceiling would fill me with a sense of overwhelming unease. When the apartment was completely still, especially at night, it felt almost as if I could hear them squirming in the food, chewing through cardboard and wood, sneaking into every crack and corner. Even the tiniest brush against my skin would make me jump. To the feeling of disgust and revulsion toward the pests, a sense of paranoia had also begun to creep in, one far worse than anything I'd experienced before. This, though, wasn't due solely to the moths themselves, but rather to other strange events that, at that same time, had begun occurring in my apartment. I'll try to recount everything that happened as clearly and logically as I can. It started with the smell. A sickly sweet odor, but, at first, barely noticeable. I would catch it now and then, drifting through the air as I moved from one room to another, or when I came home after a day at work. Unable to determine exactly where it was coming from, I first checked the fridge, the trash, the kitchen floor corners under the furniture, and the area around the dining table, places where food might have fallen and spoiled. I even looked behind the couch, under the rug, beneath the bed, and around the nightstands, even though I never really eat in the bedroom. Although I found nothing, the smell in those spots seemed to intensify slightly. So, I decided to wash the couch cushions and covers, the rug and the bed linens, but nothing changed. I checked the bathroom too, and the walls that housed the plumbing, searching for signs of leaks or mold. Still nothing. A few weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night, feeling thirsty. I automatically reached for the glass of water on my nightstand. I have this habit of filling one before going to bed, keeping it next to the bed to avoid getting up at moments like this. But then, holding it in front of me in the room dimly lit by the moonlight, I noticed the glass was half empty. Under normal circumstances, being thirsty and still half asleep, I wouldn't have even registered it. Yet I hesitated. I focused, trying to recall if I had taken a sip earlier that night or just before falling asleep. Maybe I had spilled some while setting it down. Or maybe I had simply filled it only halfway. Yes, that must have been it. Still, despite my efforts to ease my mind, something prevented me from taking a sip. The thought, weird and irrational as it was, that someone else might have drunk from the glass, had already crawled into my head. I stayed perfectly still, holding my breath, ears straining to catch the faintest sound in the apartment, a creaking floorboard, a door handle turning, a quiet breath. But everything was silent. I mean, sure, there are some weird people out there. But why would someone sneak into my apartment just to take a sip of water, inches from my face, risking being caught if I woke up? Besides, my place is pretty safe. I live on the 4th floor, so breaking through a window was nearly impossible, and the front door, which I always lock before bed, can't be opened from the outside without a key. And yet, I couldn't shake the unease. I got up, still holding the half-empty glass, and decided to check every room. As expected, nothing was out of place. The door was locked. Everything looked normal. Finally, I made my way to the kitchen. When I turned on the light, I noticed the moths again. A few dotted the pantry walls, but many more clustered on the ceiling. At least, I thought, it couldn't have been the moths who drank my water. Then again, they could still fall in, floating there, dead, until I, distracted, take a sip and I couldn't help but grimace in disgust. Why the hell was I even thinking about this? Well, because those damn pests were everywhere, on my plates, in my glasses, in my food. I washed the glass twice before filling it with water again and going back to bed. The glass thing happened again just a few days later. I woke up one morning and found it nearly empty. But this time, I was sure I hadn't drunk from it and there was no brushing it off. Especially because the day before, I had started noticing the stains. Brown smears, irregular, shifting in shape, like something rancid had been dragged across the surfaces. The smell was the same one that had been hanging in the air for weeks, only now stronger, denser, harder to ignore. And the moths, they loved it. They were attracted to it just like with the sticky traps. The stains showed up in the weirdest places. On some of my clothes, on the glass panel in the shower, on the bookshelves, on the back of the couch, whose cover I had just had professionally cleaned. It didn't look like mold, but I was sure it was something like it. Something organic. Something toxic was slowly spreading. And I couldn't stop it. It didn't matter that I threw away my clothes, tossed the sofa, scrubbed every surface with disinfectant, got rid of food, rags, and sponges. They kept coming back. And I couldn't find any explanation. I scoured the internet. I contacted professionals, pest control, and cleaning companies. But no one had a clean answer and nothing seemed to fix the problem. By now, you're probably asking yourself why I didn't just leave. Truth is, I asked myself the same thing many times. Every single day, I dreaded the moment I'd walk back into that apartment after work. The nauseating stench waiting just beyond the door. Another fresh stain somewhere in the house, covered with writhing moths. Sometimes, when I couldn't take it anymore, I'd check into some cheap hotel for the night. But I always came back. Something inside me pulled harder than the fear, harder than the repulsion. A force, no, an obsession, that wouldn't let go until I uncovered the truth of what was happening in that place. You see, there's another detail I haven't mentioned yet. Sometimes I would step into a room and immediately feel like I was being watched. Then, I would carefully scan every corner, every single object around me. Even though I never managed to find anything, my mind seemed to register something off, something wrong. You've probably experienced it too, walking into a familiar room and feeling like something is different without being able to tell exactly what. Maybe an item that has been misplaced or something you seem to notice for the first time, though now you're unsure if it's always been there. That was exactly the feeling I had in those moments. I knew something had changed, something subtle, but I could never figure out what. And then, after a few seconds, the sensation would disappear, along with the feeling of being watched. It was driving me insane. I know what you're probably thinking. So what? That's still not a good enough reason to not get the fuck out. And yeah, looking back, I can see now that you're absolutely right. As I write these words, it even sounds to me like I'm describing some idiot willing to risk a home invasion or a biohazard just to satisfy a stupid curiosity. But you have to understand, during those weeks, my mental state was far from stable. I could barely sleep, constantly weighed down by anxiety and paranoia. And when I did manage to fall asleep, usually with the help of a pill, it was a restless sleep haunted by nightmares. I'd dream of waking up covered in that rancid slime, with moths and larvae crawling all over me, burrowing into every opening they could find, consuming me from the inside, hollowing me out. In the daytime, it was no better. I'd move frantically from room to room, turning over furniture, searching without rest. Other times, I'd just sit there in silence for hours, watching, memorizing every detail, trying hard not to blink, not to miss it. But that thing, or whatever it was, always managed to stay just out of sight. Until one night I saw it. I'd just opened my eyes, unsure if I'd ever actually fallen asleep. And there it was. On the wall, just above the bookshelf. Though I could barely make it out in the darkness, its shape resembled that of a man. And yet, that thing couldn't possibly have been human. It was thin, almost like a paper cutout of a man, cut and crookedly glued to the wall. Its head was slightly lifted, and it seemed to sway gently, moved by the breeze slipping through the cracked window. Completely overtaken by shock and terror, I laid in bed, petrified. At the same time, though, I felt an urge rising inside of me. I wanted to see. I wanted to know. Every muscle in my body was tense as I slowly, as quietly as possible, slid my arm out from under the blanket, reaching for the lamp switch on my nightstand. When I finally felt it beneath my fingers, I waited a few seconds, uncertain, doubting whether I was truly ready to face whatever was there. Then, holding my breath, I clicked it on. I barely had time to catch a glimpse before it, startled by the light, crawled fast behind the bookshelf. But I saw two things clearly. The first was that its entire flattened body appeared to be made of the same semi-transparent, brown-streaked material I had once found stuck to the trap in the cupboard. The second was that its left hand was missing a finger. It must have been the moment my rational mind finally kicked back in, because I leapt out of bed and ran into the living room, locking myself inside. I turned on every light I could find and frantically searched for tape, sealing the door shut. Exhausted, I collapsed onto the floor. And everything went dark. You're probably thinking that once I regained consciousness, I finally fled that apartment and never looked back. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's not what happened. Although, I did eventually leave the place, and right now, I'm writing this from the bedroom of a small Airbnb. It didn't happen that morning. Don't get me wrong, I was absolutely terrified. I stayed locked in the living room for hours, gripped by the fear that it had somehow gotten in and was now watching me from behind a piece of furniture. Beyond the wall, I could hear my phone ringing. First the alarm, then call after call from my boss. Only when nature began to call did I somehow find the strength to peel away the tape and leave the room. Outside, everything appeared to be exactly where it had always been. Even in the hours that followed, nothing happened. That's when a new thought started forming in my head. If that thing had truly meant to harm me, wouldn't it have done so already? My boy, it's more scared of you than you are of it, my dad used to say whenever I begged him to remove a spider from my room. And though I still can't believe anything could match the terror I felt when I first saw that thing, maybe, just maybe, there was some truth buried in his words. Slowly, I began to convince myself that I could track the creature down. Maybe even kill it. Or at the very least, force it out. So I resumed the search, this time even more feverishly, more methodically. And eventually, after a few days, I found something. Not the creature itself, but something else. Something that stirred whatever little sense I had left and convinced me, once and for all, that I needed to get out of that apartment. I discovered it beneath one of the floorboards under the bed, which sat slightly raised. The entire space was stained by that wide, brownish liquid. At first, I couldn't quite tell what I was looking at. They resembled shards of old Christmas ornaments, gray and coated in something dark and sticky. And then it hit me. They were eggs. And they had already hatched. Story 4. We found a body in the woods. I haven't been the same since. A few years ago, my friend Liam and I went out hiking in a forest near where we lived. Nothing too remote, but the kind of place where trails split and disappear if you're not paying attention. We weren't exactly following the map, just wandering off the beaten path like we used to do when we were bored. It was mid-afternoon when we noticed this really overpowering smell. Sickly sweet, like overripe fruit left out in the heat too long. At first, we joked about it, thought maybe it was a dead deer or something. But curiosity got the better of us, and we started pushing through the undergrowth to find the source. And we found him. A man. He was slumped against a tree, half covered by fallen leaves and brush, like he'd tried to hide himself or just wanted to disappear. He'd clearly been there a while. His skin was greenish-black in places. Swollen. There were flies and other things. The forest had already started to reclaim him. I won't get into more detail. You can imagine. Liam froze. I remember him just whispering, "Holy shit. That's a person." I called the police. They told us to stay there until someone arrived. But we were pretty deep in, and it took them over 2 hours to reach us. So yeah, we waited. With the body, the smell didn't go away. If anything, it got thicker, heavier. The air felt wrong, like it was pressing in on us. The forest had gone quiet too. No birds, no bugs. Just stillness. It felt like we weren't alone. But we were. I kept telling myself we were. As it got darker, things got worse. Liam started pacing. I sat on a log a few feet from the body, trying not to look at it, but somehow always ending up staring. And maybe this was just my mind playing tricks on me, but his head looked like it had turned slightly since we found him. Just a little. Enough to notice. I didn't say anything. Then came the whispers. I swear I heard someone say my name. So, right behind me. I turned around fast, but there was no one there, just trees. Liam heard it too. He looked at me and said, "Did you hear that?" We both went dead quiet. Then we heard this slow, soft creaking. Like weight shifting on wood. Like someone leaning forward from a tree. We didn't run. We didn't scream. We just sat. Stared at each other. Waited for the rangers. Eventually, they came. Lights. Radios. Flashlights. One of them took us back to the trailhead while the others stayed behind. They told us the man had likely taken his own life. There was no ID. No one ever came forward. A quiet suicide, they said. But it didn't feel quiet. After that day, I started having dreams. Always the same. I'm standing in the woods again, staring at that same tree, but the man isn't slumped anymore. He's standing. Facing me. His mouth is too wide and he doesn't blink. And he speaks. Not loud. Just a whisper. "You shouldn't have found me." Liam had them too. He told me over text a few nights later. We stopped hiking after that. Liam got weird. Quiet. He'd never sleep through the night. Said he kept waking up to that smell, that same smell from the woods, filling his room. He told me once he saw footprints in the dirt under his window. But humans. Facing inwardly. I didn't believe him. Until I smelled it too. In my apartment. No open windows. Just a sudden, sharp wave of sweet rot, and then it was gone. I barely slept that night. We've moved on since then. Sort of. Liam and I don't talk much anymore. It's not bad blood, we just avoid it. Like acknowledging it makes it come back stronger. But every now and then, I still dream about the man in the woods. And sometimes, just before I wake up, I hear him whisper, "You kept me from resting. Now I keep you from forgetting." That's the part that really gets to me. Because I haven't. And I don't think I ever will. Story 5. Keep your eyes closed. If you feel scared while you're dreaming, stay in that dream. If the fear ignites your skin, wrapping around your throat while you blissfully dream, stay asleep. If you hear a noise that wakes you up out of your control, keep your eyes closed. If you hear footsteps that you can't place, keep your eyes closed. If you feel something touch you, no matter what it feels like, keep your eyes closed. If something speaks to you, even if you recognize its voice, keep your eyes closed. Closed eyes until the crest of the sun shines through the window. I have had these words ingrained on my mind for the last few days, since I awoke to my worst nightmare realized. My beloved Bobby. My perfect, kind, sweet fiancé. Who never hurt a fly. My wonderful Bobby lay next to me, eyes open in terror, mouth fully opened in a silent scream. Staring at the ceiling. I screamed when I awoke to him and saw his state. I cried and checked his pulse. Crying out his name for him to come back to me. "Bobby! Bobby! Wake up! Don't leave me, please don't leave me here alone," I sobbed. Once the police had come and asked me a million questions, and the coroner had collected his body, the police asked me one more thing. "Is there a camera?" the officer asked me. "We have one in the living room that faces the kitchen, it's wired to our phones." I responded, wiping my tears with my shirt sleeve. "We will be needing access to that," he said, clicking his pen away, "just to check on some things." "You mean? To check if I somehow killed him with something from the kitchen?" I asked, rage filling my eyes. "We have to rule it out, miss, don't take it personally," he grumbled. Once the officers had cleared out of our home, he turned to me once more. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry for your loss," he said with a frown. Then he was gone. I couldn't sleep a wink the next night. After calling everyone we knew, and delivering the bad news over and over while fielding questions I couldn't answer, I was exhausted. Exhausted but wide awake. I couldn't sleep in our bed, that was our bed. I couldn't smell Bobby there. So I made myself a spot on our couch. I put on a show, and tried scrolling through my phone when I saw I had a new email. It was the detective assigned to Bobby's case, who asked to see the footage from last night. I sighed, and opened my camera app. I exported all the footage for the last 24 hours and sent it over with a highly unsatisfying whoosh. I couldn't bring myself to look at it. I couldn't see us cuddled up on the couch together, laughing while watching a movie. I couldn't take more pain. Once the tears began to flow again, I locked my phone screen and left it on the coffee table. I tossed and turned for what felt like hours, until I finally drifted off. I dreamt of sitting in a lonely bus station. I seemed to have no destination as I watched people get on and off their buses and go on their way. I sat still, watching the passengers, when I felt the hair on the back of my neck rise. I turned around, and found no one watching me. Actually, the station in my dream had emptied, but the feeling had stayed. I kept looking backwards, looking for the cause of my paranoia, when the color of the bench I was sitting on turned from blue to pink. Oh, I'm dreaming. I watched the colors and wished I could say goodbye to Bobby. When my cell phone rang. It was apparently in my pocket, and I held it up to my ear. I answered, but the phone continued to ring loudly. "Hello? Hello?" I hear muffled words through the dream phone. And a familiar voice. "Bobby? Bobby?" I asked in a new panic. His voice was muffled, mixed with static and the ringing. But I could make out a few words. Close. Eyes. The ringing from my phone grew louder and louder, and I felt myself waking up. Why? I screamed into the phone. It's me. I feel myself fading more and more from the dream. What's not you? I scream. It's waiting. My eyes shot open. In my delirious state, I looked around my dark house, then at my coffee table which held my traitorous phone ringing loudly. My brother calling me back after his night shift. I swiped the call to answer and run my hands through my hair. Hey Jay, I mumble. After another tearful call, I put my phone back and lay down on the couch again, putting my hands over my face. Sighing deeply. Then I hear it. A soft clink of glass. I freeze, hands still over my face, covering my eyes. Another soft clink. My breathing turns harder, and I know my hands have started to tremble. I then hear footsteps walking towards me, a low growl emitting from the direction of my kitchen. I stay frozen. Babe? Babe, are you here? Bobby. I start to cry in relief, and begin to move my hands when Bobby's words from my dream haunt me. It's not me. I froze again. Baby, there you are. It's me. Wake up, baby. Oh, I missed you. I still don't move. My dream felt so real. Maybe I am dreaming again, and if it's really Bobby, he will still be here by morning. Babe? Come on. I feel cold hands grip my wrists, tugging lightly to pull them off my eyes, but I hold strong. Move your hands. Now, Bobby's voice demands. The cold hands grip me harder, trying to yank my arms down, but I hold on. That's not my Bobby. Bobby has never spoken to me coldly, and he would never grab me like this. Move them or I will take my time with you too. His voice seethes at me. I'm sobbing, but I keep my eyes covered, my hands violently shaking. And for hours, Bobby insults me, yells at me, pleads with me, bargains with me, just to move my hands. But I don't. After it was quiet for a while, I felt the warmth of the sun start to rise through our window. I shakily move my hands down, and find no one there. I whimper because I wanted to be wrong. I get out a piece of paper and write down every lesson I learned that night, and that whatever this thing is, it most likely took my Bobby. I'm tucking the piece of paper into my phone case for safekeeping when I get a call from an unknown number. Hello. Hello, this is Detective Michaels. I've been working on Bobby's case, a gruff voice answers. Oh yes. Yes, I'm here. Have you found anything? I ask, wrapping my blanket around my shoulders. Well, we analyzed your living room camera, and we found Bobby. He woke up at about 2 a.m. and walked to your living room. He just stood there for a few minutes facing the wall. Then, he turned and went back to your room. He said, I could hear his pen scribbling something down through the phone. Okay, I tell him, willing him to keep going. And the coroner got back to me just a few minutes ago, and we can clear you off this case from their findings. What did you find? I asked timidly. Well, it appears Bobby had a type of heart attack in his sleep. He continues. A heart attack? He was perfectly healthy, I snapped, still protective over him. This wasn't. It wasn't a healthy thing, Mississippi. It didn't go on the official report. He paused and lowered his voice into the phone. I'll tell you what the coroner told me, and she said it's just what she thinks, but she's never seen something like this before. Please tell me, I demand. She said that with how Bobby's face was, that he saw something. We don't know what. But, he trailed off. But what? She says she thinks he was frightened to death. I pause. That's not possible. That's not real. That can't happen. I mutter into the phone. It can. It is rare, but not impossible. The detective corrects. I'm silent. What could Bobby have seen to? I can't even think of it. And Mississippi. A word of advice, Detective Michael whispers. I'm silent. All I'm saying is that if my partner was scared to death right next to me, and it didn't even wake me up, I would only think of one thing to do, he says, while rustling a piece of paper in the background. What's that? I ask. Move. Sell your place. Go far away. And pray to whatever you believe in that it won't come looking for you next, he explains. But detective, what if it already has? I ask. He's silent for a moment. Well, then I'll start praying for you too. Story 6. Shadow Camp. It was supposed to be a celebration. The end of an exhausting journey through medical school, a coming-of-age ritual that I, Damiano, and my friends always had. Camping in the mountains, a sacred tradition for us nature lovers. But Renata, my girlfriend, didn't see it that way. We could do something different this time, she said, rolling her eyes. She was already a doctor, and for her, our tradition was nonsense. I met Renata at a party through Yara, her best friend and my classmate. With her curly brown hair and bright eyes, she was the most beautiful girl there, and I fell in love at first sight. I already had everything planned, a marriage proposal after my graduation, a year from now. She hates nature, it's our only point of contention, but I can't complain, she always goes out of her way for me. As we drove to the campsite, I tried to calm her down. Honey, we'll do something different next time, I promise. I knew she was afraid of camping, but she was getting better. Whatever you want, she murmured, laughing. Damiano, you say that every time. Do you think they've arrived yet? I decided to call Richard. The phone rang, but no one answered. Strange, they're not picking up. Try Yara, Renata suggested. I tried, and she didn't answer either. I took Renata's phone to try again and saw a strange message from Yara, "Don't come." What? Renata, what is this? I showed her the phone. She quickly averted her gaze from the road to read it. Don't come? They must be trying to be funny. Richard and Yara sometimes like to play pranks on us. Honey, I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't go, I said, feeling a chill. They're just being funny, Damiano, relax. She was strangely calm about the situation, which scared me a little, as she was usually so easily spooked. We arrived at the campsite. Richard and Yara's car was there, but there was no sign of them. Richard? Yara? I called out, my voice sounding small in the vastness of the forest. Suddenly, they emerged from the woods, smiling. But there was something wrong. Richard's smile seemed forced, almost fixed, and Yara's eyes had an empty glint I'd never seen before. You took your time, Richard said, his voice a little more monotone than usual. We got your message, Renata said, handing the phone back to me. You two are such jokers. Yara laughed, a shrill, joyless sound. Message? What message? My heart froze. Renata looked at me, her expression finally a mix of confusion and dread. The "don't come" message, she explained, her voice uncertain. Richard and Yara exchanged glances, then turned their gazes back to us with a disturbing silence. We don't know what you're talking about, Richard said, his smile still oddly fixed. Renata frowned. No, you do. I saw it. From your phone, Yara. This is my phone, Yara said, pulling out a cell phone from her pocket. It wasn't the same number that sent the message to Renata. Where did you get that message? A shiver ran down my spine. Renata's calm demeanor shattered. Her eyes widened. I don't understand. It was from your number, Yara. I'm sure of it. Richard and Yara just watched us, their smiles unmoving, their eyes empty. It was as if they were scanning us, evaluating every reaction. The air grew heavy, cold, even with the campfire Richard had already lit. When did he do that? Damiano, I have a strange feeling, Renata whispered, grabbing my arm. Her skin was cold. How about a toast to our graduation? Richard said, raising a water bottle. To our new life. Life? Yara echoed, her voice strangely high-pitched. Yes, a new life. I looked at Renata. She was pale, her eyes fixed on Richard and Yara. It wasn't them. It couldn't be them. The way they moved, the way they spoke, it was as if they were slightly distorted versions, imperfect copies. As night fell, the atmosphere became unbearable. Richard and Yara talked about trivialities, but their eyes never left us. They seemed to be studying our every move, every breath. Every time I picked up my phone to try and call someone, they'd interrupt me with some random question or a suggestion to go explore the forest. How about a walk, Damiano? Yara suggested, her smile widening on her pale face. Just a little bit before bed. Renata squeezed my hand. No. Her voice was firm. We're tired. Let's sleep. Richard stood up, his movements fluid, almost unnatural. As you wish. He and Yara set up their tents in silence, a greater distance than usual. Inside the tent, Renata was trembling. It's not them, Damiano, she whispered, her voice choked. It's not really them. What happened to them? I don't know, honey. But we're getting out of here at dawn, I said, trying to sound brave. When I fell asleep, I had nightmares. I dreamt of Richard and Yara's empty eyes, and the "don't come" message flashing in my mind. I was woken by a sound. A low whisper, like dry leaves rustling on the ground, coming from outside the tent. I looked to my side. Renata wasn't there. My heart pounded. I unzipped the tent and crawled out, the night air embracing me with a biting cold. Richard and Yara's tents were empty. The campfire had turned to embers, its weak warmth fading into the darkness. Renata? I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer. Then I heard it. A sound coming from the dense forest. A strange murmur, almost a chant, but without words. It was Renata's voice. I ran towards the sound, entering the darkness of the woods. The trees closed in around me, their branches like skeletal fingers pointing at something sinister. Renata's voice grew clearer, but it wasn't a cry for help. It was a soft, repetitive lament, as if she were reciting something. I burst through a clearing and froze. Renata was there. Her back to me, standing in front of a dark, jagged rock formation I hadn't noticed before. She was swaying gently from side to side. And then I saw them. Richard and Yara were kneeling in front of her, in a strange reverence, their bodies motionless, their faces turned upward, as if worshipping her. They weren't the same. Their eyes glowed with a faint greenish light, almost bioluminescent, and the skin on their faces seemed stretched, translucent, revealing dark veins pulsing beneath. Renata slowly raised her arms, and a sound that was not human escaped her throat. It was the melody I had been hearing, now louder, more filling, in ancient and terrifying language. The air around them vibrated. And then I noticed Renata's eyes. They weren't the bright brown I loved. They were just like Richard and Yara's. Green, empty, and filled with a darkness that could never be filled. She turned, slowly and deliberately. Her smile was that of a predator, her lips thin and stretched, showing teeth that seemed longer, sharper. Don't come, Damiano, she said, her voice no longer the one I knew, but a distorted echo of the melody that filled the air. We're home now. My feet were rooted to the ground, unable to move. What was my girlfriend was now something terrifyingly different, something that looked at me with an ancient hunger. Renata's green eyes glowed intensely in the darkness, and the murmuring of the forest became a chorus of voices, all repeating the same phrase, "Don't come, don't come, don't come." And I knew, with a terrifying certainty, that I was next. Story 7. If you find a painting of your childhood home, do this before it ruins your life. That's my childhood home. I wasn't turning down the street I grew up on. I wasn't standing near the large oak in the front yard of the house where I'd lost all my baby teeth. I wasn't sitting inside the kitchen, where, on my 15th birthday, I accidentally dropped the cake my mom had baked, which made my family laugh so hard that we shed tears. I was holding an oil painting at a Goodwill on the other side of the country. That can't be possible, my husband said. It can be possible, Parker, because I'm holding the flipping painting and telling you. 1. Language. 2. Can I say something without you jumping down my throat? Parker asked, his voice even. Yes, I said. Is there an outside chance that this just looks like your childhood home? I mean, you grew up in the burbs. A lot of cookie-cutter homes, no. I hated to admit he had a point. But as I stared at the house, I couldn't come around to that line of thinking. This was my house. Hell, the roses in the flower beds were the same size and color as I remembered them. No. I mean, I hear you and you're not off base. But dude, this is my house. I pointed at the porch. I broke that railing trying to do a ballet spin and fell into the bushes. Missed 2 left feet? Senorita trips a lot? Tried to do a ballet spin. To be fair, I did the spin. I just didn't stick the landing. A minor detail in the world of dance. The landing part. I landed on the bushes right here, I said, pointing to the painting. Hold on, I have to send a photo to my mom. Does she have old house photos? Of course she does. You've met her, right? I had Parker hold the painting and snapped a few pictures. I sent them over to Mom and asked if she had a photo to compare it to. The message came back a minute later. OMG, that's our house. Weird. Another ding brought us a house photo. It looked exactly like the artwork in my hand. I showed Parker. Christ, he said. That's it. Told you. That's wild. Is it a print or a real painting? I ran my hand across the art. There was a palpable texture to the brush strokes. Sometimes, a print may have varnish applied to give the impression of brushstrokes. This wasn't that. I think this is real, but let me check something else, I said, walking toward the wall of ugly lamps. I turned on a lamp and held the painting in front of the bulb. Some artists will draw the picture first in pencil before painting. Sometimes, you can see those marks when you hold it up to the light. Staring at the oak tree in the painting, I saw graphite streaks underneath. It's real, I declared. Who painted it? A slash of red paint in the corner mimicked a signature, but Parker and I stared at it as if it were written in Minoan linear. Parker traced the paint with his finger. Forwards and backwards. The first name may be George or Jeff. Think George. Look at how it flows. He retraced the letters and it made sense to me. Okay, what's the last name? Hell if I know. I tried Parker's finger tracing. It felt like I was tracing a line drawing by someone with too much caffeine in their system. These didn't seem like actual letters. Might be Moffat, a soft voice said from behind us. We turned and saw that a Goodwill employee had materialized. She was a short, frail-looking elderly woman with a hairstyle that resembled a well-constructed cumulus cloud in both color and shape. Moffat, I said. I think that's an M, she said, pointing to two humps. Then it kind of circles into an O and the double FS. The I and the are somewhat stylized, I think. Artists being artists. I looked and yeah, it kinda looked like Moffat. I can see it. George Moffat, you think? I do. Beautiful piece. Don't you think so? Yes, I said. It looks exactly like the house I grew up in. I showed her the photo my mom sent. How strange. Right? I grew up across the country. Why is this even here? When I was younger, there was a company that would paint your home for you. Painters? Parker deadpanned. Ignore him, I said. He doesn't know how to act in public. She laughed. I understand. I have one just like him at home. That's why he's at home. I laughed. You're teaching and I'm taking notes, ma'am. Anyway, they would come to paint portraits of your house. It was a thing for a few years. This looks like one of those. There may be a company name on the back, under the frame. I flipped the painting over and gingerly removed the frame. Sure enough, there was a small, faded sticker that read, Cozy Home Portraits Company. There wasn't any other information. I made an impressive noise. Look at that. Have a jumping-off point to find out what this is all about. Thank you so much. Marge. Marge, thank you. Sorry again for this guy. Marge, please forgive me. You're a gentlewoman and a scholar. Marge leaned into him and nodded at me. You're punching above your weight with her, kiddo. Keep her happy. Parker laughed, wrapped his arm around my hip, and pulled me in for a hug. Marge, that's the best advice I've ever received from a Goodwill employee. If only your barber had given you good advice. You could have avoided that haircut. I burst out laughing. Parker did too. Marge, I hope to grow up to be just like you. You found a guy who can take a joke. That's a start. You guys want to get that or still debating? I looked at Parker and he nodded. How can we not get this? Even if it's just for the story. Marge smiled. See, you can learn. Come on, kids. I'll ring you up. When I got home, I immediately began researching the Cozy Home Portraits Company. I had a hard time finding anything. Most of the search results were links to people on Reddit asking the same questions. Apparently, there were a lot of folks like me who were surprised to find their childhood homes immortalized on canvas. One commenter said something that stuck with me. Parker, listen to this, I said, reading the post. My mom says she remembers someone approaching her and asking if they could take a photo so they could paint the house later. She told them no at first, but they said they'd do it for no cost. Mom agreed and assumed she'd get the painting at some point, but she never heard from the company again. What's the next commenter say? This sounds fake, I read. Kind of a dickish response, no? It's Reddit, he said, shrugging. Maybe they just used the houses for inspiration and sold the paintings to commercial houses for reproductions? Then why bother involving the homeowners at all? Maybe to assuage their worries of someone standing outside their homes snapping photos of their house? Parker suggested. I mean, anyone could take a photo of our house, and I'd have no idea unless I saw them do it. True. It's weird, I'll grant you, but I think I'm on the right track. Commercial art. Americana stuff. That was to be it. He may have been onto something, but that answer didn't feel right. I couldn't work out the logic. If this company had been around for a while and painted portraits of homes all across the country for commercial sale, why wasn't there any record of them? No stories online. No official business records. No known CO or lists of artists or anyone. Hell, even searching for the name George Moffat didn't yield results. My mind told me there was something off about this. A sense of dread loomed over the whole thing. I let it marinate all day to see if I'd reconsider. Shocking no one, I didn't. I told Parker as much as we got ready for bed. You're reacting that way because of what's happening in the world right now, Parker said, yawning. There are real evil people out there, but they aren't painting pictures. Hitler painted pictures, I said. He gave me a deadpan stare. You know what I mean. I just can't let it go. It's odd. Odd that it was done at all. Odd that it traveled all the way out here. Odd that I found it. Odd stacked on odd stack on odd. Turtles all the way down. What? I said, crinkling up my face. What do turtles have to do with anything? He laughed. Nothing. Just a dumb expression. He yawned again. Why is this bothering you so much? Some random company painted and sold pictures of my childhood house with no one knowing about it. It's odd, he said with a smile. Very. It's just not sitting right with me. Parker yawned for a third time. My melatonin is kicking in here. Get some rest and see how you feel in the morning. Maybe call your mom, see if she has a story to tell. She might know something. He didn't wait for my response. Instead, he rolled over, shut off the lamp, and turned on our sound machine. As digital thunderstorms rolled into our bedroom, I lay down on my pillows but didn't fall asleep. This whole thing smothered my thoughts as much as my weighted blanket did my body. I will call Mom tomorrow. See what she knew. If anything, I heard light snores coming from Parker's direction and sighed. That man could fall asleep even if the house were on fire. I flipped on YouTube, found something to help me sleep, and closed my eyes. Or would have, if I hadn't seen our front porch light turn on. A cold touched my brain and froze the rest of my body. The light going off didn't mean a prowler was trying to jimmy open our lock. It could be a bug flying too close to the sensor or a sleepwalking squirrel. Improbable? Sure, but they were better than the alternative. I didn't want to wake Parker, but I also wasn't keen on investigating alone. While I was debating getting out of bed, I heard a noise in the kitchen. That made the decision easy. I elbowed Parker. What? He asked, his voice a blend of exhaustion and annoyance. Our front porch light went off, I whispered. Raccoons tripping the light, he said. Not worth waking me. I know, but I heard someone in the kitchen. His eyes zinged open. In a flash, he was on his feet and grabbed the bat we kept near the bed. He quietly inched along the wall until he got to the bedroom doorway. He peeked out and scanned the room before turning back to me and shrugging. I pointed to the kitchen again before popping up and joining him on the wall. Parker wasn't pleased. He told me, not in words but vigorous nods, to go back to the bed and wait. I didn't. He gave in, and we made our way out of the bedroom. Me walking directly behind him like some backwards waltz. I saw nothing. That went double after Parker slammed his hand on the switch, flooding the room with light and damn near blinding me in the process. I let out a painful yelp and covered my eyes to adjust. I heard Parker sigh. We're good, he said. Nothing here. You gotta tell me before you do that, I said, finally checking out the room. Everything initially looked washed out. I'm nearly blind. I wanted the element of surprise, Parker said. You achieved it, I said. All I see now are a bunch of little diamonds everywhere. He walked into the kitchen. Your intruder is nothing more than a fallen salt shaker, he said, holding up the culprit. Oh. Like I said, a raccoon probably tripped the light. I'm going back to sleep. You should too. He walked past me, patted my ass, and headed back to bed. I was about to join him when my eyes landed on the painting. I walked over to it and stared. In the store, looking at it had flooded my emotions with joy and happiness. But now, none of that. Unease seeped into my blood and rushed through my body. Something was different about the painting. I couldn't put my finger on what had changed, but I knew something had. It was giving me chills. I grabbed a nearby napkin and draped it over the artwork like a coroner covering a dead body. My thinking was that if there was something supernatural about this thing, the napkin would keep it at bay. Dumb, I know, but it made sense at the time. I couldn't believe that picture. That's so wild. Mom was too chipper for this early in the morning. She always was a real rise with the early bird kind of gal. That wasn't me. I still had bedhead as I sipped my cup of coffee. Parker, another early riser, cooked breakfast. I thought so too. Someone told me a company used to go around and paint pictures of homes. They'd ask the homeowners beforehand. Any memory of that? Not that I can remember. Back then, it was mostly your father who spoke with salesmen. I found them unseemly. I can't imagine he'd allow someone to do that, rest his soul. Yeah. Dad was pretty private. We had a neighbor who was a painter. Oh. Carl, no, that wasn't it. Craig. Ah, goddamn my ancient brain. Bonnie, don't get old. It's hell. I'm trying not to. It's why I do my nightly skincare routine. It's intense, Parker added with a smirk. What was his name? It's been years since I thought of him. Craig Morris? Something like that. He didn't live near us for long. Dad didn't like him. At all. Why? Craig was the human equivalent of a popcorn kernel stuck in your teeth. Irritating. He rubbed your father the wrong way. I don't remember Dad talking about him. He didn't around you, but with me, hoo boy. Craig used to walk by the house all the time, always whistling, "Pop Goes the Weasel," for some reason. He'd stand too close when he talked to you. He'd leer at me when I was outside hanging laundry on the line. He'd never get the hint that I wanted to be left alone, even though I was always short with him. Especially after he said that you were growing up nicely. Gross, I said. I was 10. Like I said, he was a weirdo. But again, most artiste types are, I suppose. Remember your Uncle Walter? Made those ghastly papier-mâché skulls. They used to be all over his house. Was like walking into some cannibal's hut whenever we'd go over there. But he was good at making them. Who'd want them is another thing altogether. He gave us one, and I made your dad keep it in a bag in the garage. Don't bring that ghoulish shit in my house. As my mom rambled about skull shapes like a Victorian phrenologist, a thought came to me. I looked down at the painting and traced the painter's name. Mom, could his name have been Craig Moffat? Parker looked over at me. I nodded down at the painting and traced what I thought the letters were with my finger. He hit his forehead with the spatula and shook his head. Oh my God. That was it. Craig Moffat. God, what a blast from the past. He really was a weird little freak of a man, my mom said, laughing. He used to wear these tiny little shorts, and he did not have the legs for it. It looked like 2 toothpicks stuck in an orange. Mom droned on a little longer, but provided nothing of substance beyond Craig Moffat's horrid legs. But she'd given me some new information, the artist's real name. As soon as I hung up, I grabbed my laptop. Craig Moffat. Not George. Craig. I see it now, Parker said. We should have never trusted Marge. Didn't like the cut of her jib. Babe, her jib was flawless, I said, turning to the painting. Her eyes, not so much. To be fair, we all agreed it was George Moffat. There's Craig Moffat. I turned the computer around and showed a webpage dedicated to his art. Parker leaned down to get a closer look. His legs do look like toothpicks stuck in an orange. Rolling my eyes, I turned the laptop back to me and clicked on the man's About Me page. It was illuminating. Craig had quite the little career. He'd worked for a few newspaper outlets, a few magazines, some ad campaigns. His stuff was good. There was a list of known works. There are a few house paintings listed here. It has to be him. Has anyone mentioned how odd this is? Parker said with a sly smile. It's catching on. Maybe he saw your home as a happy family home and wanted to capture it for that company. Is there a contact page? There is. I yelped. I read the page out loud. If you have questions about Craig or his work, please feel free to reach out here, I said. That's great. You can email him and ask directly. MoffatEstate@moffatart.com, I read. He's dead. That shouldn't matter. Maybe the guy who runs the estate can answer your questions. I nodded. It was worth a shot. I started composing a message, and Parker went back to breakfast. I glanced at the artwork on the table next to me. Something about it picked at my brain. Hey, I meant to ask, have you been watching professional wiffle ball games on our YouTube? Oh yeah, I've started turning on games after your melatonin kicks in. Put me right out. But, are you a wiffle ball fan? No, I said laughing. I just happened across it one night, and I fell asleep like 10 minutes into a game. It's better than ocean waves. Which game was it? Rhinos against the Storks? Oh man, those two teams hate each other. Storks have won the last 3 series behind Dustin Braddock's nasty banana ball. I stopped speaking because I could feel Parker's smug smirk on his face. I looked up and caught it with my own eyes. Not a fan. What the hell is a banana ball? Ping. They emailed back already, I said. What the hell? Maybe there isn't a lot going on at the Moffat estate? Hi, Craig Moffat was my father. He did several pieces of local homes during that era. I would love to discuss this with you. Can we set up a call? So there clearly isn't a lot going on at the Moffat estate, Parker said. I'm going to say yes. I think I have to, if for no other reason than my own sanity. Go for it. I can be there for the call if you need me. So I set up a call with the estate for later that day. Hopefully, there'd be some information that I could use to stop the itch in my brain. Parker served me breakfast before he got ready to head out to the gym. You never told me what a banana ball is, he said, placing the plate in front of me. It's a side-arm slurve, a strikeout pitch. Nearly unhittable if Braddock is on his game. Parker gave me a quizzical look. I sighed. Not a fan. After Parker had left for the gym, I went back over to the painting. It was still sitting in the last place I had left it. I still had the napkin over it. The bad vibes I felt earlier were still there. In fact, they'd grown worse. I didn't even want this thing in my house anymore, covered or not. Despite my misgivings, I pulled the napkin off the painting and gave it a once-over. I felt my stomach gurgle and my throat went dry. Looking at this now literally caused physical pain. It didn't make sense. Where's the front door? I suddenly asked myself out loud. The front door of the house was gone. Blacked out like an actor with perfect teeth coloring in one to look sufficiently destitute for a role. I scraped where the door had been with my thumb. No fresh paint. It was like it had always been that way. But it hadn't. I checked the photo I sent to my mom to confirm. What in the... There was a creak on the basement stairs. There very much shouldn't have been a creak on the basement stairs. The basement was home to nothing but dust, Christmas decorations, and my ugly childhood couches we didn't have the heart to throw away. Since none of those things can walk, this made no sense. I tiptoed to the knife block and pulled out a butcher knife. With my phone in my free hand, I used my nimble thumb to unlock it. I was ready to dial 911. But as I stared at my reflection in the knife blade, I questioned whether I was prepared to stick it into another person. I wouldn't know that until it came to that moment. I very much prayed that wouldn't happen. Another creak. Near the top of the stairs now. It was getting closer. I flexed the grip on the knife. I tried to control my breathing but couldn't. Turns out all that woo TikTok relaxation breathing stuff was just bullshit. My heart was thumping like an angry jazz drummer's long-awaited solo. I felt sweat drip down my neck. Something flickered on the painting. It momentarily took my eyes off the basement door. Like last night, I initially registered nothing different. Then I noticed. Through the window of the living room, it looked like someone had turned on a light or lit a fire. Splotches of yellow and orange paint filled the window frame. The jingling of the basement door handles snapped me out of my trance. My palms were sweaty. My legs swayed like bamboo in a strong breeze. I gathered all my remaining strength and yelled out, "Hey! Stay away from me." I wanted to say more, but overwhelming fear shut me up. The jiggling stopped. Relief. My hectoring worked, for about 2 seconds. The basement door cracked open. There was a ghostly, pale face staring back at me. That was when my brain firmly decided whether I was a fight or flight kinda gal. I was flight. Fuck this. I dropped the knife, which clattered on the tile like that drummer hitting the hi-hat, and sprinted toward my front door. I yelled gibberish the entire time, tears streaming down my face, and blasted out of the door. My fingers hit send on the call, and seconds later, an annoyingly even-keeled 911 operator connected me with the police. Parker returned home before the police arrived. He found me sitting inside my locked car. Before he could crack a joke, he caught sight of my face. I'd been crying and could feel how puffy my eyes were. Consternation crossed his face. I rolled the window down. "Get in the car." He did. I explained everything to him. He was astonished. He was confused. He grabbed my hand and held it steady as I went over everything, pausing occasionally to sob like a child with a skinned knee. When I was done, he asked why I didn't leave right away. "Who do you think you are, Rambo?" I laughed. "I need that." For a few seconds, I was. Then I wasn't. I wasn't even Gizmo pretending to be Rambo. He gave my arm a loving squeeze. "If it'll help you calm down, we can watch some pro wiffle ball tonight. I hear the rhinos are playing the turkeys." "Storks," I said, "but they are actually playing the habaneros tonight. Gil Faust is looking to debut his chili ball pitch." He leaned in and kissed my forehead. "But you're not a fan." "I'm not." A knock on the window caused me to scream. The cops had arrived. If they were curious why we were sitting in our car, they kept it to themselves. I relayed what happened, and they said they'd go into the basement and check it out. 15 minutes later, they came walking out. "We didn't see anyone down there," the cop said. "But to be fair to you, your basement gave me the heebie-jeebies." "Great," I said. "I know it's not what you wanted to hear, but it's the truth. On the plus side, I haven't seen that love seat since I was a kid. Want it? It's better left to the past. You two have a nice day." We watched them leave. Parker turned to me. "You okay?" "No, and I won't be until I go into the basement myself." "What? Why?" I can't explain. Something is drawing me there. It sounds crazy, I know, but I feel it in my bones." Parker saw the determined look in my eyes. This was going to happen. Had to happen. He sighed. "Want me to go in first?" "Yes," I said. "Are you actually going to wait for me to go in or follow right behind me?" We both know the answer to that. Resuming our reverse waltz, we went back into the house. Once in the kitchen, we stopped near the painting. Parker looked over and agreed that there were changes. We turned our attention to the closed basement door. Parker put his hand on the handle. "We don't have to go down here, Beth," he said. "The cops didn't find anyone. If there's a ghost in this house, I need to know. If we know, we can remove it." "How?" "I'm still working on that part," I said. "But I need to know for certain. I won't feel safe otherwise." I'm inclined to just say yes and move on. Something altered the painting already. Who the hell did that? "One issue at a time," I said. He knew he couldn't talk his way out of this. He knew I needed this, and he loved me enough to see it through to the end. Even though he was petrified too. The skin on his arm had goosebumps as soon as we walked into the kitchen. It felt like Braille to me now, and the only thing it said was, "Let's not do this." But that feeling in my brain, the one drawing me down there, wouldn't leave. It was stronger now that we were at home. Something was loose in my house. I knew it in my heart. Whatever it was, I needed to keep it from roosting in my new home. Let the ghosts live in the past. Leave my future alone. Parker gripped the handle, sighed so loudly it was heard 2 towns over, and opened the door. The stairs led down into the dark of the basement. The floor around the landing was the only thing visible. In the abstract, it wasn't anything. Right now, though? Horrifying. Parker found the light switch, illuminating the rest of the space. So far, so good. We took our time walking down the stairs, creaking along the wooden one step at a time. Maybe it'd have the same effect on the ghost that hearing creaking steps did on me. Perhaps the phantom was hiding, holding a ghost knife and deciding if it was going to play Ghost Rambo or just fearfully disappear into the walls. The house in the painting had a basement too, I whispered. When I was a kid, I hated going down there. Any time of day. Just didn't feel natural, you know? Are you trying to get me to stop doing this? Sorry, I'm rambling, I said. I kept right on rambling. What bothered me wasn't so much going down there. What scared me was the trip back up, turning your back on the dark. I used to walk backwards up the stairs. We can try that in a few minutes, Parker whispered back. Any other ghost stories you want to share before we hit the landing? Sorry, I said. It just popped into my mind. I haven't thought about that fear in years. Since we moved away from there, actually. That's not comforting. We got to the bottom and took a look around. Everything looked normal. No surprises. Just our old, ugly furniture and friendly Santa decorations smiling and giving us a frozen wave. I thought about turning and heading back up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was supposed to be down here. I was also positive Parker would be furious if I went darting up the stairs without him. Leaving him alone in Spook Central might be grounds for divorce. We headed over to the furniture. There was a layer of dust on everything. I smacked the pillow, sending it flying into the air. I coughed and sneezed, instantly regretting my actions. Parker's withering glare told me he wasn't fond of my actions either. Sorry. I don't see anything out of the ordinary here, do you? No, I said. It looks like it always does. Feeling gone? Can we go back upstairs now? Before I could answer, we heard the familiar chime from our security system, followed by the calm, reassuring voice informing us that our front door was open. What the fuck? I said. Shoo, Parker responded, his finger to his lips. He pointed up to the ceiling. We cocked our ears and concentrated. For about 20 seconds, there was nothing. Silence. It didn't last. The floorboards wheezed as someone took slow, deliberate steps above us. You could hear the footfalls as they moved from the front door to the hallway. Trembling, Parker pointed up at the ceiling. You could physically see the floor bow ever so slightly from the person's weight. I didn't even think that was possible. What do we do? I whispered. I don't know, Parker said. Maybe they'll leave? A second later, we were cloaked in total darkness. All the power in the house had gone out. The only light came from the sunlight streaming in from the open door at the top of the stairs. It wasn't much, but it was a beacon. A lighthouse. Our way home. Is all I was able to say. Someone upstairs ran down the hall, through the kitchen, and to the basement door. They slammed it shut, plunging us into instant midnight. I wanted to scream. To yell so loud it'd shake the heavens. But I couldn't. My body physically couldn't make that happen. It'd give away our location. I clutched Parker's shirt so hard I was afraid I'd rip it right off him. If it bothered him, he didn't say. This sucks, Parker mumbled. Understatement of the goddamn century. Ho 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 Merry Christmas. One of our Santa decorations started going off. I nearly peed myself at Santa's sudden arrival. I imagined it would have been the same response I would have had if I had seen him as a kid. Kris Kringle was soon joined by all of our Christmas decorations going off at once. Dozens of laughing Santas, lights flickering off and on, inflatables rising like zombified plastic bags. The noise was deafening, but strangely festive. The strobing lights in the pitch black caused afterimages to dance in my rods and cones. I slammed them shut and silently prayed for this all to end. Someone must have heard because, as quickly as they'd come to life, they stopped. We stood in the dark, not breathing, not moving. Neither of us knew what to do. Nothing in my life had prepared me for this. I couldn't shake the idea that whatever was coming would be worse than what we'd already experienced. There was a creaking again and a sudden rushing of blinding sunlight from the top of the stairs. Someone had opened the door. Before we could get a glimpse, the door slammed shut, and something sprinted down the now dark stairs. I pulled Parker back onto the old love seat. We sat on the edge and kept our heads on a swivel, even though the basement was too dark to see our own hands. We weren't alone anymore. As my fingertips grazed the couch, I realized something. These were originally my parents. My parents got them when I was living in the house from the painting. They were a physical connection between the past and now. Are these what caused my sudden desire to come to the basement? Was I being manipulated by this thing? Could I trust myself at all? That dread feeling I'd had since I brought the painting into our house intensified. I felt it in my bones. Deeper even. My aura. My soul. I leaned into Parker's ear and whispered an apology. He didn't vocalize a response, but squeezed my arm. I squeezed back. My body shook, and I couldn't get myself to stop. I wanted to run for the stairs, but that old fear came rushing back. I knew if I ran up those stairs, it'd follow behind me. Something whooshed by us. My hair flowed with it, trailing behind whatever had sprinted past. I nervously dug my fingers into the fabric. We heard the sound of some liquid splattering on the floor across from us. Water? Heavier than water. A sound that made my guts twist soon joined the drips and splashes. Someone started whistling a familiar tune. Pop Goes the Weasel. The Christmas decorations flickered on and shut off. In the brief flash of light, we could make out a figure standing across from us. Craig Moffat. Pop, he screamed as the light strobed. Goes, he screamed again, a foot closer this time. Another foot closer. Almost directly in front of us now. The lights flickered again, and his face was right next to mine. A sinister smile as he slowly whispered, Weasel. I felt something wet and slimy rub against my cheek. Parker stood and, surprisingly, swung at Ghost Craig. It didn't find the ghoul, and as the darkness returned, his fist only found the arm of the couch. I heard his knuckles crack and him swear in pain. My ears were the only thing working at that moment, though. I sat frozen, tears streaming down my face. The lights in the house came back on and I screamed. On the wall across from us, where we had heard the water, the painting was hanging. Only, it wasn't the old house. It was the current house. All the windows and doors were filled with flames. There were two figures on the front lawn. Parker and I. We were both dead. Standing behind our oak tree watching it all was Craig Moffat. Parker, let's go. I didn't have to tell him twice. We broke for the stairs and took them 3 at a time until we reached the top. I grabbed the handle and shoved my shoulder into the door, expecting it to hold firm. It didn't. Parker and I spilled onto our kitchen floor. I scrambled up and practically yanked Parker into the kitchen. I was about to slam the door when I saw Craig Moffat standing at the bottom of the stairs. We locked eyes. My mind flew back to my childhood, a memory stored deep in the folds of my brain. I was sitting on our porch reading a book and heard that damn whistling. Craig Moffat, a Polaroid camera in his hands and portrait photos on his mind. I was afraid he'd stop and take a picture of me. I was right. Even now, I could hear the heavy clunk of the shutter and the whirring of the processing photo as it slid out. He shook it, and as the fog of war slowly dissipated on the photo, he smiled. This way, I won't forget you. I slammed the door shut and urged Parker to grab the car keys. He turned the corner to do so when I heard him sharply yelp in surprise, followed by the squeak of his sneakers on the hardwood and his ass hitting the ground. I ran to him expecting to see Craig, but was stunned by the sight of a living man surrounded by 2 yellow hulks outside my front door. Once my brain processed the information, it was clear those men were wearing biohazard suits. It still didn't answer why men in biohazard suits were outside my door. But it cleared up that there were. The suitless man in the middle, though, had a more than striking resemblance to the ghost I'd just seen in my basement. Only younger. Fuller. Fleshy. Sorry to startle you both, the man said, raising his hands in peace. You contacted us about a painting you found. I'm David Moffat. Craig was my father. You've got to be shitting me. We were supposed to talk on the phone, I said. Yes, but we were worried things might have progressed too much by then. Tell me, has the door in the painting disappeared yet? How did? David turned to his men. Call for the extraction team. Turning back to us, he urgently asked, Where's the painting? The basement, I said. But it looks different now. What in hell is going on? Parker asked. Different? Would you say something violently different? Our dead bodies on the lawn and the place ablaze is violently different. He nervously turned to where the biohazard-suited men had gone. The experienced extraction team. Parker stood and held my hand. We looked at each other and back at David Moffat. We both cracked. Small smiles that turned into chuckles that turned into a laughing fit. I read somewhere that mental breaks can start like this. Whatever. I leaned in. David Moffat, the son of your childhood painter neighbor Craig Moffat, himself a ghost that nearly killed us, is standing in our fucking veranda, Parker said, barely able to get the words out between screeching laughter. I mean, what the fuck is this life? Seconds later, a team of armed men in hazmat suits carrying unknown machinery rushed in and headed for the basement. We heard one of them scream, and then the sounds of mechanical engines warming up. David nodded toward the front door. We should go outside. We did. What the hell else were we going to do? Once we were outside, David pulled out a pack of cigarettes and offered us one. We both declined. David indulged and nodded back at the house. This is the experience team. What's going on? I asked. I'm going to level with you. What I'm about to say is pretty weird. I like to say weird things to people. Set the right tone. Sir, on what is easily the weirdest day in not only my and my wife's life, but I'd argue humanity's life, nothing you can say will top what we've already been through, Parker said. I mean, I just discovered my wife watches professional wiffle ball, for God's sake. Not a fan, I mumbled. Dad was a strange man. Lots of demons. When he could keep them at bay, he did great work. But that was never for long. Around the time when you were a kid, he got deep into the occult. It was a faddish passing fancy at first, but soon he found a deeper meaning in it. It consumed him. Around this time, well, he conjured a demon. I think I'm having a stroke. He made a deal. We don't exactly know the details, but what we do know is that Dad agreed to start a company that would paint portraits of people's homes. The twist was that the homes he picked would become targets for the demon. Naturally, Parker said, because why not? He'd take a photo of the home and give it to the demon. The demon would curse it and insert it into the canvases of my dad's paintings. These photos would be a connection between the subjects in the art and the demon itself. The pull got stronger when the artwork found its way back to the subjects. Then they'd, well? He trailed off. Meet each other? I said. In a manner of speaking, yes. So many questions bounced around my brain. This all sounded so outlandish, and yet the memory of the photo came back to me. This way, I won't forget you, I said out loud. Confused, Parker looked at me. What? We don't know how many paintings Dad did during this time, but we've recovered 65 in locations from New York to California. The people selected seem to be random except for you. Why me? My guess? You were neighbors and, well, my dad really didn't like your dad. The feeling was mutual. Just then, the extraction team came rushing out. One was limping. The machines they brought looked broken, but the lights were still on. One of them had the painting in a biocontainment bag. It was smoking. The experience team, David said, washing out his smoke on the bottom of his shoe and pocketing the butt. Thank you for letting us help rid you of this menace. The work is exhausting, but my family has to atone for Craig's wicked actions. David nodded and turned to leave. I reached out and grabbed his shoulder. Wait, that's it? We're free? Just like that. Just like that, he said, turning to leave. He stopped and spun on his heels. Unless you have something from the old house in your new house. Then you kinda sorta leave a back door for the demon to return. So, if you do, I suggest destroying it. He tipped his cap and left. Parker and I locked eyes. The fucking love seat, we said at the same time. My back hurt just thinking about hauling it up those narrow stairs. Later that night, We torched the sofa in a makeshift fire pit in our backyard. We ate pizza and watched the flames consume the potentially demonic couch. Can't imagine that's a sentence that's been said a lot in history. As we did, relief filled my heart. The dread was gone. I looked over at Parker and smiled. I think we can put to bed the argument about who had the weirder childhood, Park. He laughed. Yeah, summers with my Amish family can't compete with demons. His phone buzzed. He looked down at the notification with concern. I felt my stomach twist. Please tell me it's good news. The Rhinos or Habaneros game is about to start. I set a reminder. Wanna watch? I touched my heart and felt pure happiness surge through me. Tears. Grabbing his free hand, I held it tight and gave it a big squeeze. I have something to confess, I said. I think I'm a legitimate fan of professional wiffle ball. I know, but I know. We sat together, letting the crackling of a burning demon couch and the crack of a wiffle ball bat fill the night air. I snuggled into Parker's shoulder. It was warm, inviting, home, and not one haunted by an angry ghost. How did one girl get so lucky? Story 8. My daughter keeps drawing me dead. When my daughter started drawing pictures of me dead, I thought it was just a phase. Kids are weird, right? The first drawing showed up on the fridge a few weeks ago. I was half awake, grabbing some coffee, when I noticed a new crayon sketch next to her usual stick figure family doodles. But this one was different. The bright reds, yellows, and blues were gone, replaced by thick, messy black lines. It showed a stick figure with a crooked smile, labeled Daddy, impaled on a giant spike. Blood or the crayon version of it gushed from the top of my head in heavy red streaks. I just stood there, not sure how to feel. Jenny walked in, dragging her stuffed bunny, and climbed up on the kitchen stool. Hey, sweetie, I said. What's this one about? She glanced at me, completely calm. It's from my dream. Your dream? I laughed, a little uneasy. That's intense. She just nodded and poured herself some cereal like nothing was wrong. I took the drawing and tossed it in the trash. That should have been the end of it. 2 days later, I found the second one under my pillow. This time, the daddy stick figure was being ripped apart by what looked like wild dogs' round mouths full of teeth, red, angry eyes, all snarling. Again, way too much red crayon. Jenny, I said when she got home from school. These drawings, they're starting to get kind of scary. She gave me a little wink. He told me to draw them. Who? She shrugged. Just the man in the walls. My skin crawled. I told myself it was just her imagination again, maybe something she picked up from a cartoon or a spooky kid in her class. Still, I emailed her teacher, Mrs. Carter, just to be sure. She replied the next morning. Jenny is a very imaginative child. Exceptionally talented, actually. Some kids just process the world differently. Yes, she talks a lot about her dreams. But they're only dreams. Let me know if you'd like any resources. Mrs. Carter. Only dreams. A week later, something happened that I couldn't explain. I was out back, chopping wood near the shed. One of the big branches, thick and old, suddenly broke loose above me. I heard it at the last second before it slammed into my shoulder. The pain was blinding, but I managed to crawl away. No major injuries, just a bruised collarbone. I iced it and tried to shake it off. That night, Jenny left another drawing on the kitchen table. It showed me by the shed, crushed under a massive branch. Blood and all. But here's the part that made me stop cold. I was wearing the exact same hoodie as in the drawing. Same lettering. Same boots. Even the same axe. Jenny, I said, my voice shaking. When did you draw this? She looked up from her juice box. Before school. No, I mean, before or after I got hurt today? Before, she said, frowning a little. But I guess I messed up. You didn't die. Then she skipped away, humming to herself, leaving me alone with the picture. I checked the trash where I'd thrown the old drawings. They were all still there. Too specific. Too real. Impossible to ignore now. I started keeping a record. She made a new drawing every night, sometimes two. Always of me. Always dying. One where I was electrocuted in the bathtub. One where I jumped off the roof. One where a plastic bag was pulled over my head, my fingers clawing at it. They were getting more detailed, more real. Sometimes I'd wake at 3 a.m. and hear her crayons scratching from across the hall. I stopped sleeping. Then on Tuesday, I found a drawing that chilled me to the bone. It showed me lying in bed, eyes wide open, mouth agape. Blood pouring from my ears. Above me, something massive and black, faceless, but shaped like a person. Its body was made of lines, like frozen TV static caught mid-buzz. At the top, in red crayon, tomorrow. That night, I locked my bedroom door. Unplugged everything. Slept with a flashlight and a baseball bat. Every creak in the walls made me jump. At 4:10 a.m., the baby monitor, which I hadn't used in months, crackled to life. No voices. Just static. I unplugged it. But when I woke in the morning, the picture was gone. In its place, a new one, same bed. Same body. Same blood. Caption: "You got lucky." I confronted her. I know she's only 6. I know she's just a child. But I was falling apart. "What is this, Jenny? Tell me the truth." She looked up and for the first time, her eyes filled with tears. "He says I have to." "Who?" "The man in the wall. He talks on the radio. He tells me how you're going to die. He says if I don't draw it, then it really happens." I was shaking. "This isn't real. This is your imagination, sweetheart." "No," she whispered. Mommy didn't believe me either. I froze. "What do you mean?" She told me to stop drawing her. Said it was scary. So I stopped. Her voice dropped lower. Then she died. I couldn't breathe. My wife, Evelyn, passed away 6 months ago. Sudden aneurysm. No warning. Jenny had been home. She was the one who found her. I thought she'd blocked it out. Maybe she hadn't. Or maybe... I ran to the attic and pulled out her old sketchbooks. The ones we hadn't touched since the funeral. Buried deep between crayon scribbles was a single page. Mom lying in a hospital bed. Bruised eyes. Blood dripping from her nose. And behind her, that same faceless, static man figure. Dated 2 days before she died. That night, I tore every drawing off the walls. Burned the sketchbooks in the fireplace. Jenny watched from the stairs, silent. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "But he's still here. We're in a diner now, holed up at a corner table with 2 backpacks and nothing else. She's sleeping beside me, clutching her bunny. And I'm writing this because I don't know what else to do. Maybe if someone reads it, they'll believe me. Maybe they'll find a way to stop it." The last drawing, it's still in the pocket of my coat. I haven't looked at it since we ran. I'm unfolding it now. It's not what I expected. It's me sitting at a table, writing. Jenny is asleep beside me. And behind us, outside the window, is the static man, his face pressed against the glass, arms wide open, waiting. Written above in perfect, red crayon letters. "You can't run." I didn't want to believe it. But that's when it hit me. I'm running from something I can't escape. I don't know what will happen next. I don't care. I'll keep running. Until whatever's coming finally catches me. Story, mine. The traffic light. I'll start this off with some background details, because that makes the most sense in this sort of thing, doesn't it? I live in the suburbs. It wasn't always that way, but it has been for the majority of the time that I can remember. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that, as a kid, life can get pretty boring. Especially if you're the sort that struggles with making friends. Now, personally, I wouldn't call myself a bad kid, but I did tend to get into trouble. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? If I wasn't vandalizing Mrs. Sandra's house, cutting the tires on the car in front of the house that everyone called the witch's house, then I'd be sitting in my room, staring at a TV like almost everyone else. The worst part for everyone else, really, was the fact that I didn't get in trouble over it. My parents were so busy patting themselves on the back for raising a kid that goes outside, that they didn't really pay attention to what I was doing. So I got away with it, and somewhere along that path I started growing up. When I was 15, my parents had a rather particular conversation with me. One about responsibilities and aging. Essentially, I had a curfew and was now freely allowed to roam beyond the neighborhood. Fun, right? It wasn't. I didn't have a license and vehemently refused to try and get my permit. I was too distractible. I still am too distractible, and the idea of getting behind a car and resulting in someone's death is mortifying to me. So instead, I was forced to drag a positively ancient bike out from behind the old shed and see if it still worked. To my incredulity, it did. Well, it made a few weird sounds at first, and any time I sat on the cushion it made a sound that heavily implied I absolutely did not want to look through its foam. But it functioned, and it became the tool through which I could more easily spread my particular brand of terror. At least that's what I thought. See, right as you get out of my neighborhood, going in the direction most easily accessible to me, there's a large, open intersection. I knew that I could technically ride alongside the cars, but an immense amount of trepidation and uncertainty stopped me from fully placing myself upon the road. So instead I used the sidewalk and drove down to the point that I could use to cross. If you're from America, you know just how terrifying it can be to stand there. It's like an ocean between one point of safety and the next, with great bustling, roaring beasts surrounding you on either side. Needless to say, I have a bit of a fear surrounding cars, but figured my bike would steady me fast enough that it wouldn't matter. And the first time? It did. I got across after pedaling as fast as I could, and sailed onto the other side with a victory cheer. There were a few weird looks from people that could hear my shout from inside their cars, or behind the window of the local Wendy's. But I didn't care. My newfound freedom was exhilarating. Things were pretty normal after that. I kept to the curfew, and made sure the explanations for my doings were vague, but detailed enough to satisfy my parents. I couldn't quite tell you when things changed, but I believe it might have been one particular night. I was running late, having gathered a friend or two to smash in the window of some old warehouse near the edge of town. As it turns out, the warehouse still had an active security guard, and we'd scattered. My bike had started groaning about halfway home, but had made the journey. Then, there had been Thai traffic light, the one right beside my house. Not too many cars were still about. The majority have vacated the streets for their outdoor resting spots along the walls of the buildings reserved for people. But some still did speed past, and for some odd reason, my hands felt clammy as I reached up and tapped the button. Seconds ticked, the world muted as I stared towards the small red man across the road, leaned halfway upon my bike as I was. When he shifted to green, I pushed off onto the street, the serene night air pushing into my hair. As I pedaled, I had the distinct feeling that I wasn't pedaling hard enough. My heart kicked up, and everything became too clear as I desperately attempted to reach the other side of the street. Something that felt wholly in vain as I stared towards the slab of concrete, and began to realize that no matter how hard I pushed down on the pedals, no matter how many inches I sailed through, they refused to bring me closer to getting off of the road. Somehow, just as a car appeared in the early night fog, the spell broke, and I crested the concrete quickly, swerving to the right and practically collapsing from the exertion. When I finally got home, I made some excuse about my bike acting up, got a stern look and the typical, make sure it doesn't happen again. Sleep came slow as, every time I closed my eyes, the only thing I could see were cars surrounding me on either side, slowly inching closer. I stayed in the neighborhood for the next week, but, well, I got restless. There came that need, the desperate desire to do something. So I rode to a friend's house, and everything was fine. Just like before, it didn't happen until I was coming back. It was dark as it had been before, only I wasn't running late, I'd made sure I wasn't. The streets breezed past me, muted in their silence. It wasn't until I was halfway to the intersection that the chain on my bike snapped, and I was left coasting to a halt. I was forced to walk the rest of the way, and made what I thought to be the smart decision, texting my dad a picture of my bike and preemptively apologizing for being late, if I was. I got a thumbs up in response, and smiled a bit as I came up to the intersection. I had not forgotten about what happened last time, but through the quirks of the human mind, I had managed to convince myself it was just a dream. That didn't stop my hand from shaking as I pushed down the black button and nervously glanced around the road. Seconds ticked, and there was not a single car. The most important part is the utter lack of cars on the, not in the distance, and certainly not up close, as I watched the little man shift from red to green, and jumped as fast as I could down onto the pavement. Only, like before, that horrid welling pit of realization welled itself up inside me. The very simple revelation that I was not walking hard enough. Not fast enough. There was something about the way that I stepped onto the ground in those moments that was simply, for lack of a better term, wrong. And then, it crested the horizon. A small black sedan moving too fast across the street, headed directly towards me. I felt tears well into my eyes, and ditched my car, letting it fall behind me as I desperately attempted to run. But I couldn't. It moved with blistering speed and then I blinked. I blinked and I was met with the most horrid sound I've ever heard. It was the roaring of 10,000 lions, all stitched together to the point that their sounds began to cascade and began to bleed into one another. I stumbled, bright LEDs burning my corneas as I fell onto my knees. Fell to stare towards rubber. Billions of pieces of rubber digging incessantly into the pavement, crushing life too fast for it to even blink. Somehow in the mess of noise and concealing masses of car flesh, I managed to find my way to my feet. Tripping over my own toes I ran. Choking on the fumes they excreted, I bolted as hard as I could towards the other side of the road. A side that, with horror growing centerfold deep into my thoughts, I realized had ceased to exist. Unable to accept this, I started running harder, gasping as the air in my lungs was replaced with exhaust fumes, as my lungs began to rust like a car's pipes. It was then, only then, that the cars began to move faster. Their gyrating bodies slithered against slick oil-wet pavement, bridging the gap between metal and skin. I felt their hot, porous bodies push into mine, and could have screamed when I felt the metal shove its way into my arm. Then I woke up. Police cars surrounded the edge of the concrete sidewalk. My vision was blurred, breath coming in short, sharp heaves. There was blood. My blood, doused deep into the cement from a large, horrid gap of flesh on my arm. They didn't believe me when I told them what happened. Nobody believes me when I tell them what happened. I haven't crossed a crosswalk since, and I refuse to be behind the wheel. I have a feeling if I ever was, I would get into a wreck. Maybe I'd even become one of those cars, waiting to squeeze the life out of some poor soul that dares to get in the way of the machine.